Hi everyone, and welcome to this plant tutorial bite for Oxygen Not Included. As always, make sure to check out the plants tutorial bite if you haven't already for an overview of the plant mechanics. In this plant tutorial bite, we're looking at Plume Squash Plants, a cold purple vegetable plant that makes food for dupes and Bammoths. Plume Squash Plants are found in the Frosty Planet Pack TLC's cool pool biomes, with the Bammoths that feed on them and the ethanol that is used to fertilise them. In the series start, these cool pool biomes are a little further out from the starting ice cave biome, but can be reached quite quickly. If you scramble them into another map type, then they will appear in random places. Plume squash plants are grown from plume squash seeds, which are dug up from growing plants, dropped on harvest, or can be found buried in cool pool biomes. Looking at their info, plume squash plants, like all the plants in the Frosty Planet Pack, need cold temperatures to grow and an atmosphere of oxygen, polluted oxygen, or carbon dioxide. And if grown domestically, then they need a source of ethanol, so are more easily grown in hydroponic tiles. When harvested, plume squash plants make the dupe food plume squash, which has a terrible quality. Or instead of being fed to dupes, Bammoths can also eat the plume squash plants, either as the plant growth or as the harvested food. In terms of numbers, as each domestic plant makes 444 kilocalories per cycle, that means you need 2¼ domestic plants per dupe, or 9 plants for every 4 dupes. That also means 9 wild plume squash plants per dupe. But the plume squash does also have one recipe in the deep fryer, and when combined with tallow, makes squash fries. This increases the calories from 4,000 to 5,400 kilocalories, meaning you only need 1 2/3 domestic plume squash plants per dupe, or 6 2/3 wild, but at the cost of tallow, which is made from spigot seals. For more details on spigot seals, see their dedicated critter tutorial bite. When feeding regal Bammoth squash fries, you'll need 2¼ plume squash plants per Bammoth. Other than dupe food, the other use for growing plume squash plants is in ranching Bammoths, and I covered this in more detail in their critter tutorial bite. Bammoths need 4 domestic plume squash plants each, or 16 wild ones, which means fitting 24 plants into a ranch for 6 Bammoths limits the design, but is possible. Note here that Bammoths make a lot of meat, but the calories made by ranching them is the same as just having the dupes eat the plume squash raw, but the advantage is the extra Bammoth patties and reed fibre made, as well as the better recipes featuring meat instead of plume squash. An important thing when growing these plants is temperature. Obviously early on there will be enough cold areas to easily grow them, but generally the map will heat up as you play. If things eventually get too hot for the plants above -14 degrees Celsius, then they can be easily moved to another cold area. For a more permanent solution, you could use a cooling loop, but beware the coolant choice here, as water doesn't work, and nectar from bonbon trees is a great choice. I explained cooling loops fully in the cooling tutorial bite. To fertilise the plume squash plants, there are a couple of ways to get ethanol, and spigot seals make it directly from drinking the nectar in bonbon trees, or alternatively the trees can be harvested for wood and processed that way. When ranching spigot seals, which I covered in the spigot seal critter tutorial bite, they each make 40 kilograms per cycle, so that's enough for 2 2/3 plume squash plants per seal. The other way to get ethanol is by making it in ethanol distillers from wood, and there are 4 sources of wood in the game now. Firstly, the old arbor trees make wood from their branches, as I covered in the dedicated plant tutorial bite. A wild arbor tree can support 2.78 plume squash plants, and a domestic arbor tree 11.1 plume squash plants. The second way is from shearing phloxes, and there is actually a cycle here that can be made. I covered this cycle in both the Bammoth and Phlox critter tutorial bites, but by using 2 Phlox ranches to 1 Bammoth ranch, you will have enough ethanol for the 24 plume squash plants. Also, bonbon trees can be harvested for wood, and a domestic bonbon tree makes the same amount of ethanol as a wild arbor tree, at the cost of snow and possibly mercury if lit with mercury lamps. A domestic bonbon tree grown for wood makes enough ethanol for 2.78 plume squash plants, or 0.7 plants for a wild bonbon tree. And finally, ochre shells do make wood when their malts are crushed, but if fed from polluted dirt, then you'll need one of the other wood sources anyway to make this polluted dirt in the ethanol distiller. But they can also be fed from slime too, so it is possible to get wood this way, but difficult to do in large amounts. For numbers here, a single poker shell should be able to, on average, support 2.8 plume squash plants. Then that's everything in this look at plume squash plants in oxygen not included. I hope this helps you with farming this root vegetable or mammoth food, and thanks for watching.